For the past 3 or 4 months, I've been switching between my cross-country bike and my trail bike and really paying attention to the ride quality. So in this video, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how these bikes compare on more cross-country type trails. And I've done several videos of comparing cross-country and trail bikes, but I want to make kind of an updated one because I think it's still a relevant topic. A lot of people that are choosing between different types of mountain bikes are really trying to decide between cross-country and trail. Most of us don't need an enduro bike for our everyday type of riding. Now, if you live in an area where you have access to enduro trails, then yeah, you probably want to choose an enduro bike if you like that style of riding. But I think for most people, the types of trails that we have access to warrant either a trail bike or a cross-country bike. So let's talk about how these compare. So what I've done, like I said, over the past 3 or 4 months is spend a week or two on each bike and then switch over to the other one. And what I've found is it really takes about one full ride to get used to the handling qualities of each type of bike to really get the most of it. In other words, just riding it as hard as I can. When I come off of a week or two of riding the cross-country bike and switch over to the trail bike, the first 15 minutes, it feels sluggish. And again, this is on more cross-country type trails with lots of turns, and it just feels like it corners slower, it feels like it accelerates slower, it just feels more sluggish. But the more I get used to it, the more I can make the most of the bike and hit the corners faster. Now, I will say on the cross-country bike, I can start a corner quicker. And on the trail bike, it takes a little bit more real estate to corner the bike. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you kind of just get used to that quality, I feel like I could probably get through a corner just as quick, and I'll tell you why coming up here in a minute. But on my ride today, I was riding the Transition Spur, and I was riding a section that I had actually raced several times over the last month, and I almost hit a tree because I was coming around a corner and I started it just a little bit too late. And that's one thing I noticed about the trail bike is I have to initiate the corner just a little bit quicker than I would on the cross-country bike. The cross-country bike is just, it starts the corner quicker. That's the best way to describe it. It has a shorter wheelbase, a steeper head angle, and those are the two qualities I think that make these bikes ride differently. It's that shorter wheelbase and the slacker head angle on the trail bike. So the trail bike, by the way, is a Transition Spur that I'm riding, and the cross-country bike is a Niner RKT9 RDO. It doesn't really matter the brand for this video because every major bike company is going to make a really solid trail bike and usually a cross-country bike. Trail bikes are more popular, they're more versatile, and I'm going to talk about that kind of near the end of the video. But still, most bike companies are going to make a pretty solid cross-country bike. Now, let me just throw something here that cross-country bikes today are starting to come with more travel. Whereas way back in the day, cross-country bikes had 80 mils of travel up front. Now they have either 100 or 120. My bike has 120, I love it. The trail bike has 120. That's a topic for another day, but this trail bike, even though it has 120 front and rear, it feels like it has more because of the way the frame rides. I'm not going to get into that because I've made other videos on the Transition Spur. Like I said, there's all kind of great trail bikes out there. You know, Ibis Ripley, Niner Jet 9 RDO. Specialized makes a stump jumper that's a great trail bike. And there's, like I said, almost every major bike company makes a really solid trail bike. But let's get back to the handling qualities of these bikes. One thing that I found with the trail bike is you feel like you maneuver your body more to work the bike around a corner. So I feel like I can lean the trail bike more, and that's actually one thing that I like about the trail bike. It feels like it flows more, it leans more into the corner, it's more stable in the corners, it feels less unsettled. But back to the leaning, you know what? It may be the bars. So the bars on the trail bike are wider; they're 800s versus the cross-country bike has 760s. So maybe that is why I feel like I'm leaning more in the corner. But I do feel like the geometry of the bike allows me to lean the trail bike over more because if I start to lose the front end on the trail bike, I feel like I can recover it easier. On the cross-country bike, because of that shorter wheelbase, steeper head angle, if the front wheel starts to slide out, it is more difficult to recover. Now, like I said, on the cross-country bike, you can start the turn quicker and the bike just feels more agile. It's a little more kind of just telepathic, and as soon as you turn the bars, it'll start to make the turn. That can be good in situations where you're really trying to get around tight turns quicker. It can be bad because even though you can turn the bike easier, the trail can turn the bike easier. So if you hit something that unsettles the front wheel, it's just harder to recover on the cross-country bike. So I would honestly say that it takes more of a skilled rider to really make the most of a cross-country bike. Now, if you have the skills, you can make a cross-country bike go really fast on cross-country trails. Something else that I've noticed on the trail bike is that I feel like I can just throw the bars around more with less consequence, and that makes the bike feel more aggressive. So on trails, and this is a no-brainer, but I'll just say it, on trails where gravity takes over, in other words, where you're going downhill, the trail bike is more fun to ride. You feel like you can attack the downhills. Even on the downhills that I have on my local trails, which are not very long, most of them are not very steep, they still have roots and turns, but even on those types of downhills, I just feel like I can attack them more on the trail bike. I can be more aggressive with the handlebars and feel more in control of the bike. Now, one major downside to the trail bike, and I hesitate to call it a downside because it's a trade-off, is the pedal strikes. So the bottom bracket is lower, and it's not just the transition spur. It's like every modern trail bike today is getting lower, longer, slacker, and that lower causes the pedals to be lower to the ground, and you get more pedal strikes. In fact, I would say I probably get a pedal strike every time I take the trail bike out. Now, that is a trade-off because the lower bottom bracket makes it feel better on the downhills. It makes the bike feel like that you get that attacking feeling. You feel more stable, you feel more in control, especially over rougher terrain because the bike is lower, but you just got to pay attention to it. Now, the reason I like the higher bottom bracket on the cross-country bike is I can pedal through the corners safer and I can pedal through the corners more. One thing that I noticed about my son riding behind him, he has gotten extremely fast very recently on a cross-country bike, and in fact on a short section like 10-15 minutes I'm having trouble hanging on his wheel. Now, we haven't compared on like a 2-hour cross-country race, but one thing that I noticed riding behind him is he pedals really well through the corners. Now, he's on a Niner hardtail, probably very similar bottom bracket height of my Niner RKT9, but he pedals through the corners, and that's what you can do on a cross-country bike. So that is definitely an advantage of a cross-country bike, is being able to pedal through the corners. One obvious advantage of the trail bike is it typically has more travel. So for example, my cross-country bike is 120 in the front, but 90 millimeters of travel in the rear. They're both full suspension, obviously. The trail bike has 120 in the front as well, but it has 120 in the rear. And this frame flexes more on the transition spur. Now, most trail bikes today have 130 in the front and 120 in the back, and most are 29ers. But that extra travel just adds to the flowy feel, the smooth feel of the trail bike, which I love. So which one do I recommend? Which one do I prefer? I would say that unless you're racing or riding with people who ride really fast on cross-country trails, I would say a trail bike is for you. Cross-country bikes are for people who, like I said, who race, who ride with groups that ride really fast, or you just like that sensitive steering, that almost like a sports car feel if you ride trails that aren't really rough and technical. Even on days when I'm not racing or riding with other people, I love taking my cross-country bike out because of how just agile it feels, flickable. It feels like it brakes quicker, it accelerates quicker, it climbs better, and that's a fun type of riding. I mean, you know, mountain biking is awesome because it's not just the downhills that are fun, it's also picking the right line around roots and rocks, hammering up a climb, seeing how fast you can get through a series of corners. It's all fun. And so there are situations where the cross-country bike is more fun. On my local trails right near my house, most of the time I prefer my cross-country bike. Now, trails down in Santos and Ocala that have the the rocky technical type slow tech. I like the trail bike because of the additional travel, the more stability. So it's really going to depend on your situation. If you ride in a lot of different varieties of terrain, so you ride on cross-country trails and then you might go on a trip where you go up to the mountains and you're riding more technical, steeper trails, you cannot beat the versatility of a trail bike. So hopefully this video helped you, and when I explained the ride qualities, hopefully it helped you decide which bike is going to be best for you. Like I said, it's still a very relevant topic today. That'll do it for this video. Any questions or comments, as always, drop those below. I'll do my best to get to them soon. Thanks for watching.